"Yes," said cook, "that is soup you are smelling. The princess, not that you would know or care, is missing, bless her good-hearted self, and times are terrible. And when times are terrible, soup is the answer." Don't it smell like the answer? Soup is the answer, people. And guess what? I made the soup that they talk about in this book, for real, and it's delicious. It was from a blog called Joyful Fayette Family, I think, and they figured out a recipe, and so I made it, and it's supposed to have watercress, and I couldn't find watercress, so it's got arugula instead. But you know what? It's freaking good. Soup is the answer. Salutations! My name is Becca, and this is Words and Other Malarkey. Welcome to Lessons from My Bookshelf, where I read through all of the books in my home library, talk about the writing lessons that we can learn from them, and also just talk about them in general. It's fun! Yay! And today's book is The Tale of Despereaux by DiCamillo, a real old favorite. It's actually like a big part of my childhood because I remember reading this and loving it, my sister reading it and loving it, and obviously buying it and owning it. So yeah, this is going to be fun. I'm super excited. The Tale of Despereaux was written in 2003 and won the Newberry Medal in 2004. So I don't remember how old I was then, but I know I was like upper elementary school when I did read it. And it's a middle grade juvenile fiction book, but honestly, it's a book for all ages, and we'll get to why. It's just a great piece of writing overall, so I don't consider it like, oh, you know, I feel like there's kind of like this weird, I don't know, stigma with like middle grade fiction sometimes, especially if you've read like a lot of YA or been reading a lot of YA and adult fiction. There's some great middle grade fiction out there. This is one of them. Tale of Despereaux is for everybody. So what it's about is, well, in its own words, it's about being the story of a mouse, a princess, some soup, and a spool of thread, which is actually more or less what it's about. Really, it's about a mouse named Despereaux who's born with his eyes open, and he's kind of spaced out. He's just not really like normal according to other mice. He likes to read and daydream about knights and princesses, and he doesn't really want to do mice things. And then he meets the princess because they live in the palace, and first talks to her, which is a no-no, and then falls in love with her, which is even more of a no-no, and he ends up banished from the mouse community because they think he's a danger to them, and ends up in the dungeon. But little does he know that in the dark of the dungeon, there's a rat who once went upstairs for soup and for the light because the dungeon is dark, and because the dungeon is dark. Really? But no, there's like a huge emphasis in a cool way on like dark and light. There's like a real clear dichotomy in this book, but not just in the theme, also in the imagery. You've got like the dungeon that's dark, got the palace that's light, you've got all this. Anyways, and the rat is plotting revenge against the princess, so it's kind of a hero story, a little fairy tale-esque, and it's just such a cute book. It really is, but not just cute. It's also really deep. I mean, it is a fairy tale and it ends really happy, but it's not like a happy-go-lucky book. There's like some dark themes. There's a character who was like abused by her guardians growing up, so much so that they describe her ears as looking like cauliflower, which makes me cringe every time I think about it. And she can't really hear, and that's like part of her character, is people think that she's stupid because she can't hear. She is also kind of stupid, but it's because she had a really rough childhood. So, and then there's death, and there's, you know, revenge, and there's all sorts of fun things that, like, it's not a heavy book at all, but it's not like, you know, that's part of the reason why I think it appeals to all audiences. It's not just a happy-go-lucky fairy tale that doesn't have any stakes, and that's what makes it so good. Kate DiCamillo, you might recognize her name. She also wrote Because of Winn-Dixie, which is a book that I've never read, and it also got made into a movie, which I never saw. But unfortunately, The Tale of Despereaux got made into a movie. I don't remember when, but I remember that it was awful. It wasn't true to the book, and just the whole tone of it was off. And like, he wore clothes, and that wasn't right. He's just a regular mouse in the book. See him on the cover? He's not wearing a hat or anything. And we'll just pretend it never happened. What movie? Where? I didn't know it was made into a movie. Okay, moving on. So what is it about Tale of Despereaux that's so captivating? I mean, the writing is just so clear and succinct and fun. And the chapters are some of the shortest that I've ever seen. And that really works well with the intended audience too, because let's face it, kids have shorter attention spans. But I mean, I have a short attention span, and I'm not a kid. I think I'm a kid, but I'm not. So it really moves fast. I think I read this in like less than a week, which is almost unheard of for me when it comes to books. And yes, it is easily digestible, but it's not simple. There's a lot going on in a really cool way. So the chapters are short, and she's able to really like pull you into the scene in a very short amount of time, which I think is a real talent as a writer. I mean, there's something to be said for really long, chapters or descriptions or scenes when it's necessary, but in this case, like, the shortness works in this book's favor, because in a really short amount of time, you get a really clear picture of what's going on, who's involved. The descriptions are kept short but vivid. The details are really clear. Really fun writing, which definitely makes it an easy read. Also, one of the biggest things that stands out about this book, and I know it's not the only book that does this, but it's definitely a feature of it, and it's that the point of view is this third-person omniscient narrator who consistently refers to you as the reader. Like, you're supposed to feel like you're being told a story. Even like from there's like a page, I don't know what it's called, before the first chapter. It's kind of where like the dedication would normally go, and it says, "The world is dark and light is precious. Come closer, dear reader. You must trust me. I'm telling you a story." So right from the get-go, it's gonna be in the style of like a storybook. Or what it really reminded me of was like in Princess Bride, how the grandpa is telling his grandson a story, and you get pulled out of, like, you're listening to the story with them, but you also get pulled out of it to like see what they're doing. And the narrator in this book will do the same thing. It'll pull you out of the story to explain something to you or to make something literal. And here's the cool thing, is that it actually works in this story. I think that in the hands of a lesser writer like me, it would seem really like contrived and forced, like you're just like telling and not showing. But maybe because it's middle grade fiction, but really because I think it's supposed to be in that fairy tale storybook style, it makes it really quirky and witty. And I don't think it's supposed to be assuming that the reader is stupid. Like, here's an example of the narrator pulling you out. "Reader, you may ask this question. In fact, you must ask this question. Is it ridiculous for a very small, sickly, big-eared mouse to fall in love with a beautiful human princess named P? The answer is yes. Of course it's ridiculous. Love is ridiculous." So it does that a lot. And sometimes it does pull you out of the story. And I think I noticed it more this time around than I did when I was like 10, because it was just part of the reading experience. But now going back and reading it, it's like, oh, that really kind of stands out. But I think it's supposed to stand out, because what this story really does well is play with the conventions of fairy tales. And it doesn't really follow any fairy tale that I can think of off the top of my head, but like the elements are there. There's a princess, there's, talking animals, there's a hero, there's a knight, not a literal knight, but like there's a hero's quest. There's all these things that you would expect to find in a fairy tale, but in a very unique way. I think the idea is very well developed. I ranted last time about how there's no original idea, and there really isn't, but this is really putting it in a very unique context. Hello, bookmark. And taking elements that you're familiar with and putting them together in a really unique way. And I gotta say, like, the incorporation of soup as like a focal point, and almost like the philosophy of the book, is really fun. And it's gonna make you want soup more than you ever thought you could want soup. I mean, it made me want soup so much that I actually looked up the recipe of the soup that they keep talking about in this book and made it. I mean, it's winter right now, and when this video posts, it'll probably still be winter, but it's snowing today in my part of the world, so like there was nothing else to do today except make soup and film a YouTube video. It worked out so well. So why do I talk so much about this narrator thing? Because, I mean, it is a unique feature of this story, and it wouldn't work in every story, and I don't recommend you use it in every story, but it just goes to show that you can really have fun with conventions. And in this case, taking some really simple themes, dark versus light, the power of love, the hero's quest, and making it a mouse and making it, involve soup and a spool of thread and all these unique images is just such a fun read and is so creative. And in a really small package, it gives you a lot to think about. And if you're a kid, then it's like, oh, that was such a cool story. I love Despereaux. I love the princess. And as an adult, you're like, whoa, there's actually a lot going on here. And I'm not saying that kids are dumb. Kids are very smart and astute, especially like middle grade. And so they're going to pick up on themes too. And that's why I think that the narrative choice with the omniscient narrator that is literal is not supposed to be like strictly for the middle grade audience. It's not saying that kids are stupid, that they can't pick up on themes. It's just kind of having fun and being a little ironic because, in a story, in a fairy tale, you expect the themes to be very evident and very universal, so good versus evil, dark versus light. And there are those sorts of universal themes in here, but it's put together in a very unique way. And in fact, Kate DiCamillo talked about in her description, this idea came from a friend's son wanting a story about an unlikely hero, and people love stories about unlikely heroes. And having one about a mouse is fun, because usually the mice are like the sidekicks or like the comic relief, or I mean, at the moment I can't really think of a fairy tale where the mouse is a hero. For a story that's really mirroring fairy tales, you also care a lot about the characters. You care about Despereaux even though he's a mouse. You care about the rat, Roscuro, who's really the villain, but kind of not. I'm not trying to spoil anything, but he's just mostly misunderstood. But he drives a lot of the conflict in the book. You care about him because the story gives him some background. And actually, the other really cool thing about this book is that even though it is the Tale of Despereaux, it really has 3 separate storylines, and it's divided into sections. So book 1 is about Despereaux's backstory, and then book 2 is about the rat Roscuro's backstory. Book 3 is about Miggery Sao, who's the girl that had a really hard childhood. And then in the last book, they all weave together, and it doesn't feel like you're going off course, even though you are from the main storyline, because ultimately, if it were just to track with Despereaux, it would have been a really kind of boring story, and the narrator would have had to drop in a lot of, oh yeah, by the way, this is this person, this is what they're doing. So I guess this is a really good read just to study structure, because it has such a unique structure, narrative structure, unique plot structure. So as a writer looking at it like that, it's really fun because you start to see things and say, wow, that's I've seen this before, but I've never seen it like this, or oh, this is a really cool way to do this, or oh, I've never seen this done before and have it work so well. So, it helps if you're Kate DiCamillo, but everybody has to start somewhere, and this book is a really great way to, especially if you like the fantasy genre, you like the fairy tale genre, just kind of read this, give it a shot. I think you're going to find that it'll teach you a lot about narrative voice, about imagery, and about how less is more. This is 268 pages. It's a really complete story. You get a lot of detail. You get a lot of individual scenes and a lot of character development. But like I said in the beginning, the chapters are really short, the scenes are really short, and the details are really kept minimal. You only know what you need to know, you know, and it really paints a picture. I'm trying to think who it was, but I feel like it was in a college class, like creative writing class. They talked about how sometimes because you can't focus on every single detail in a room, and this gets so hard when you're like describing setting too. And I'll admit it, I'm like really bad at describing setting. I would rather just write dialogue and write character interactions all day. I don't want to describe like where the characters are and what the environment looks like. But you don't have to describe every single thing in the room. In fact, if you do that, you're going to bore your audience. What you need to do is pick the things that are important and basically give the person like a snapshot, or like, I feel like the example I'm trying to think of is like painting related, like an impressionist painting. I think that's the example that my professor used, because like you don't see every detail, if you've ever seen an impressionist painting. They're like kind of broad brush strokes and things are kind of almost blurry, but like you get the idea and you see the right things. So there you go, there's your metaphor for the day. So Tale of Despereaux is a great read. I highly recommend it no matter what age you are. If you have kids, your kids will love it. I think it's recommended for like ages 7 to 12. So even though I said that it has some like dark themes, like it's not something I think that's going to scar your child. It didn't scar me, but I was like 10. It's just fun. It's so much fun. And then go eat some soup. You don't have to make the soup. It's basically a chicken soup, like chicken noodle without the noodle, but it's really good. So read The Tale of Despereaux and go eat some soup. Next time I'm reading Storyteller by Edward Myers. It's an old favorite. I remember that it was like my favorite book when I was in middle school, and we're gonna see if it still is. I mean, from what I remember, it's really good. It's got that fairy tale vibe again, so we're kind of sticking with the same theme here, but I promise not everything in my repertoire was fairy tale-esque. So tune in next time. Stay weird. Eat some soup.